Hey friends, today we are in After Effects. I am using CS6, you may be using CC, so some of the elements may be a little different, but they should all work pretty much the same. So I'm just going to introduce you to the areas that we are working with in After Effects. Over here on the left we have the Project tab. This area is where all of your footage will go. It's sort of a library of the footage that you'll be using. So any shapes you create or bring in from Illustrator will end up here in the Project tab. Just behind that, to the left, we have Effects controls. So when you add any effects from future tutorials, you can control how they work in this tab here. On the right, or in the center rather, we have the composition screen. This is where your base video will go, and you'll be able to see any of the editing changes and basically work on your video from the screen. Then down the bottom we have our timeline. There's no footage in there at the moment, but this is where you will move through your video and do most of your transformations. Behind that at the moment I have the render queue, and this is the area where you will export out your video and change the exporting settings. So if your windows look different to this at the moment, you can head to the window toolbar at the top and hover over workspace and just click the effects panel, and that should give you the setup I have at the moment, which I find the easiest to work with. You can always experiment with the other views to make sure that you are comfortable with your workspace. So to bring in footage to your project bin, you can either double click on this grey area and you can bring in some footage. I have a video of some flames somewhere. Here we go, slow-mo flame. And you can see that this is an MP4 video and it shows you its size and all of the relevant details up here in the project tab. And you can also go to File and click Import and Import File, and that will give you the same option. So I'm just going to import this this JPEG of a dog, so this will be a still image. Then we need to create the base for our video, and this is a very important stage. This will give you the right settings for your submission. So to create a new composition, we're going to go to the Composition tab on the toolbar, click New Composition, and then this setup is what you want to be working with. So give your composition a very descriptive name, so I'm going to call it P3_101. And then this is going to be my first version that I'm working with, so I'll put the number 1. In the preset drop down menu we have a lot of different options to choose from, but for what we're working with in 101 for project 3, you need to be looking at the HDTV 1080/25. So this means it is a high definition video. It's at got a height of 1080, and we're looking at a 25 frames per second frame rate. So when we hit that, we can see our width is 1920, our height is 1080 pixels. Make sure we have the aspect ratio of 16:9. You're working in square pixels, your frame rate is 25 frames per second, full resolution, and the duration down the bottom, I have mine currently at 20 seconds, which is the maximum time limit for your animation. There is also an option to change the background color, so if you know what you're working with at the moment, you can change that now. If not, you can always change it later. So when I hit OK, you can see that our video area appears, and this is in that nice 16:9 high definition format. So immediately down in the timeline, we begin to see that we have a time code, which is giving us the time that we're looking at on the video. As I click and drag handle across, we can scrub through the time in the video. You can see you can hit 3 seconds, 4 seconds, and basically see what's happening during your animation. But we need to move some footage down here. So if I grab my slow-mo flame, I can drag that right down into the timeline and let go, and you can see that my footage appears on the composition. I have a bar in my timeline, and as I click on the handle and scrub through with this bar, you can see that my flames animate as I move along. You can also grab your footage and drag it straight onto the composition area. You can see that it shows you the outline of how big your footage is, so you can position that where you want it to start. And now I have 2 flames and I have 2 bars on my timeline, and they both move at the same time. Now you can start to see how if I have one piece of geometry that I am moving on twice, the names down here are a little bit confusing. So you can actually right click on your files and you can rename which one it is. So I can say left flame, and I can call this one over here right flame. And you can actually see when I click on these, they're the wrong way around. So I'm just going to click on left flame, and I'm going to click and drag my left flame sorry, to the left, and I'm going to click and drag my right flame to the right, and now they are named correctly. So you can click and drag and move things around like in Photoshop. You can grab these handles and you can scale like this freehand. While you have it clicked, you can hold down Shift and that will keep it in the right ratio, so you're not sort of distorting your flame in any way, or my flame in that case. But the easiest way to sort of transform your image in the most basic way is by going over to the little drop down arrow on the timeline, and we're working with the left flame here at the moment. You can see we're faced with audio or transform. We'll look at audio in a future tutorial, so if you just go to transform at the moment, you can see we have a lot of different elements to play with. You can move the anchor point, which is this pin in the middle. That's going to be the axis of rotation. So if I click and move one of these values, you can see how it moves itself, the anchor point, up or down. If I move some of the position numbers, you can see the left number controls the horizontal axis, so I can move that around, and the right number controls the vertical axis. We have scale. At the moment it's linked, but you can unclick that and change the scale, skew your image at some point, so you can get a nice controlled scale here. We have rotation, so the degrees are on the right hand side and the number of times it is translating that degree is on the left. So here I'm just going to click a rotate and we can drag that around and watch it spin. And then there's the opacity, which is how transparent the image is. So 100% is very visible, and then all the way down to 0, which is not visible at all. So this is how we will create our fade ins and fade outs. Alright, so those are the things you can change, and you can see that if I move something and then scrub through my timeline, you can see I've changed the entire footage. It's just sitting there on its rotation at the bottom. And if we needed to animate that, we're going to put on our keyframes. Keyframes may be kind of familiar to you in terms of stop motion or animation. So we're going to click on our little stopwatch to the left of one of these values. Say I'm working with position. If you click on that little stopwatch, you can see that a keyframe appears on our timeline, and that keyframe is going to hold all of the information that is set there at that point. So if I move to 1 second and I say actually at this point in time I want my position to be higher, you can see that a new keyframe appears and it holds all of that information that you've just changed. So when I scrub back to 0, you can see how my flame moves up because it's going from keyframe A to keyframe B. So on to 2 seconds. Again, maybe I want to move my flame across a little bit. So I just move and then I change the number, and that automatically creates a keyframe. So here I go. I can press spacebar to play that through at real speed. And there is my flame moving across from A to B to C. Now you can click on these keyframes and you can move them. So I can put keyframe B actually on the other side. So now my animation is going to go from A to point C to point B. And the closer you have your keyframes, the faster your animation is going to be. You can see if I move them quite close and press spacebar, it moves a lot faster than it did before. And if I spread them out, obviously the more seconds between them, the slower your animation is going to be. If you unclick your stopwatch, you're going to lose all of your animation keyframes, just like that, and there'll be no animation left. So just be wary of which stopwatches you actually have turned on and which ones are going to pick up every move you make. So I'm going to hit the opacity, and we're going to start at an opacity of 0. I'm going to move to 2 seconds, and I'm going to change the opacity to 100, and it creates the keyframe for me. And then you can see when I go back to the beginning and I press spacebar, my flame fades in. So if I wanted to do the same thing, I can just, the same thing with position or scale, you can click all of these little stopwatches on, and you can animate them at different times. So I'll do some scaling, and then a little bit further along I'll change the position, and maybe a little bit further along I'll do some rotation, just for fun. So now we should see all of those animations working together. So it was getting bigger, fading in, and moving across at the same time. So they're kind of the basics of keyframes. You can have a play with those, and there'll be a more detailed tutorial on transformations coming up shortly. Going back to file organization, another thing you can do here is to click on this little colored square underneath the label tag, and that basically gives you a whole lot of colors to choose from. It really helps if you are grouping together different layers and you need sort of that visualization of where they are in all of your massive layers. So you can use color coding as well, that's quite useful. You can also right click on your project area and you can hit new folder, and you can create little folders for you to sort of organize your files in this project area. It does get really useful when you have a heap of things to move around.